Hello, everybody. Welcome
Hello.
to our Chapel in York webinar. Today, it's about understanding tax and legal benefits for fundraising in Europe. So welcome. We're very happy to have you. I think it's going to be exciting and interesting. My name is Arnaud Marcillassi. I'm the head of international fundraising at Chapel in York. For those of you who don't know Chapel in York, we have more than 450 clients all over the world. And I have a team of 37 experts working for me and for our clients all over the world too. And basically, we help our clients with all aspects of international fundraising, including tax and legal, today's topic. So in Europe, understanding the tax and legal benefits for fundraising involves navigating a complex landscape, as rules and incentives can vary significantly across different countries. Trend at the EU level is to work at harmonizing rules, but it's a work in progress. So what is the present situation and what is the future looking like? Today, we have three great speakers. We have Nancy Bikson, lawyer and managing director at Chapel in York. We have Stephane Couchoux, lawyer and a friend. Bonjour, Stephane.
Hello.
Associate at the law firm Fidal, one of the leading firms in France and Europe. And we have Marcel Mock, another lawyer. It's a very lawyer webinar. And executive director at the Chapel in York, Netherlands Foundation. So we'll just move with the webinar. Don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat and at the end of the webinar. Nancy, I'll give you the floor first.
Thank you, Arnaud. Bonjour à tous. Thank you all very much for coming, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some interesting information today about Europe. We know that there's a lot of interest in it, both the EU and the greater Europe. So we're going to call Europe today, including the UK and Switzerland and all the other various countries. Chapel in York itself, thank you very much for coming from our standpoint, again, as Arnaud has said. And we look forward to give you some really useful information. So as Arnaud was starting out, at the moment, fundraising from Europe is about fundraising from individual countries. There is no Europe per se that you can fundraise from. So that means countries with very disparate regulations in terms of donations and tax deductibility, etc. We're going to do a talk at the end we're going to talk a little bit about some specific differences, so you can get an idea about the breadth of the thing. But basically, that it looks like is not going to change. That each country is going to continue to be able to have its own donations and its own tax regime in terms of what those donations look like. So, for example, in Sweden, there is no tax deductibility for donations, which irritates a lot of people. But that's very different in other countries. So where there is movement in Europe, so again, you need to talk about that very specific thing with your donor in terms of what is their tax position. Basically, it also is exactly the same as it is everywhere in the world. You have to give to a local charity to get a tax deduction or tax benefit. This is where the EU is going to is making some inroads and some changes. The EU Commission has adopted a proposal to facilitate cross-border activities for nonprofits, and the intent is to provide to have a new legal form of charity. They're calling it an ECBA, where if you set up in one country, in the Netherlands or in France or in Spain, that charity would be able to be registered sort of automatically in other countries. They're looking at that being available within, well, starting at least to make it international law within 2 years. No idea as to how long it's actually going to take then to do the actual things. But that's a really interesting step forward. I mean, in the 25 years I've been doing things in Europe, they've been talking about it. So the fact that this might actually happen is really interesting, because it will make it easier to get to offer tax deductions to donors in the EU because of this. At the moment, what are the other options you can do if you're fundraising? There is transnational giving. So if there's an entity in one country, transnational giving would be able to or should be able to help you get the money into another country while still getting the tax benefits to the donor in the first country. I was one of the people that started it, so I can probably say it doesn't always work, but the idea is really brilliant. There are some rules and regulations, though, about them. Sorry about the dog. That's that's really that is, at least it's an option. Chaplain York itself has foundation in the Netherlands and Switzerland, and Marcel will tell you we're also registering in other countries, so we are also able to offer from those countries and the UK and other countries around the world the option for tax deductions for donors from that country. And then there's always, of course, the option of finding a local charity or partner that will accept tax-effective donations and work with you to get it. So there's a lot of movement in this, which is quite exciting and actually very worthwhile to try to move money from one European country to the other. Sometimes if you're outside, I know we had people who were registered from outside of Europe, getting money outside of Europe is not as straightforward as within Europe. That's where things like Chaplain York's foundations can help. And there are others that also operate in this space as well. So I don't want to say it's just us, but again, it's about offering those local tax benefits for donations that are going to go to a different country. I think I'll stop there and turn it back to Arno to talk about what some of the specific country rules and regulations are. Arno?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Okay, we have the pleasure and the honor to have a great lawyer from France, from actually the beautiful city of Marseille, with us today, and he's a super expert with all these topics in France and outside of France. So, Stephane, I would like you to talk now about your view, the present situation in France, and how the future looks to you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you today. Thank you, Arno. I'd like also to thank the Chaplain York team for hosting this event. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the rules that enable project leader or charity from outside France to attract donations from a French donor. Sorry in advance for my poor English. I try to read the short notes I draft. So to do this, I will shortly address the following points. Understanding the tax incentive system for French donors, what types of organization can be supported, what are the conditions of eligibility to the French tax incentive, and finally, in which country are the project leaders, the charities, and programs located between France, EU, or outside EU. So to begin with, I'm going to introduce you with the framework for tax incentive in France for donations to non-profit organization. For the past 20 years, France has had a highly attractive tax regime for philanthropy, which applies to both in cash or in kind donations, whereas most other countries simply deduct donation from taxable income or profits. So in France, we have created a tax reduction. In return, the price to pay for this extremely attractive mechanism is that it is subject to strict conditions of application. So regarding gifts by individual donors, French individual donors, there are two tax incentive schemes forecasted by the French tax code. First, regarding income tax, impôt sur le revenu, a French donor can benefit from a tax reduction, of 60% the amount of the gift. Of course, all these tax reductions are capped, but I don't go forward in the details. Then the French donors can also benefit from real estate wealth tax reduction, impôt sur les fortunes immobilières. Regarding real estate wealth tax, a French donor liable for this tax can benefit from a tax reduction of 75% of the amount of the donation. Finally, regarding gifts by companies, corporate tax, impôt sur les bénéfices, impôt sur les sociétés, can be reduced for French companies of 60% of the amount of the gift, or 40% above 2 million euros of donation over a year. So that is the quick presentation of the tax incentive in France for French donors. Now, what types of organizations can be supported by a French donor? Are mainly concerned by the French tax system, organizations of a general interest character, meaning in practice NPOs or charities, and public entities such as the French state, local authorities, or public establishment. So the price to pay in France is the 6 conditions to fulfill for said non-profit organization, charities, or public entities. France, having put in place a highly incentive tax regime in favor of philanthropy, the conditions required by French tax law and doctrine are particularly strict. For an entity to be of a general interest nature and qualify for tax reduction, first, the entity must operate in one or more of the fields referred by the French tax code, among which social, education, humanitarian research, environmental protection, amateur sports, culture, the French language and scientific knowledge, l'exception culturelle française, art, culture and heritage, and gender equality. These are the fields eligible. Then, second condition, the NPOs, the charity management, must be non-profit making. Gestion des intéressés pour les francophones. 3, its main activity must be not competitive regarding other commercial entities. 4, the non-profit organization must not have a special relationship with a company, for instance, in order to directly increase its turnover, the turnover of the commercial entity. 5, the entity must not operate for the benefit of a limited circle of persons, the cercle restreint person. 6, and this condition is important for our webinar, the entity must conduct its activities within the not only France, but within the EU. Regarding activities conducted outside the EU, stricter rules apply, and tax doctrine leaves us with less freedom to allow a French donor to support a project leader outside European border. That's the last point I would like to present. The question is where? Which program and in which countries, France, EU, outside EU, are eligible? So let's have a short focus on gift made outside France. In fact, there are two types of situation. First one, the NPO is based in EU country, or Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein for the European Economic Area. So, as you know, since the Perche case of 2009, a French donor can grant charity based in the EU. To ensure the security of the French donor, the NPO must be able to provide the donor, the French donor, documents justifying either that these charities outside France in the EU benefits from a specific agreement from the French tax authorities. In this case, the French tax reduction applies automatically, or the said charity purpose goals and has characteristics similar to an organization, an NPO based in France. Without agreement, it is possible for a French donor to help to grant a gift to an organization based in other country in the EU. In this way, the French donor can present these documents, agreement or documentation, specific documentation, to the tax authorities, French tax authorities, in the event of an audit. The second case is when the NPO grants by a French donor is based outside the EU. In theory, a French donor's tax reduction may be called into question if he supports a non-European organization. But by way of exception, a French donor can benefit from the tax reduction, provided that the NPO, based outside the EU, conducts action belonging to one of the following specific fields recommended by the French tax authorities: humanitarian actions, actions contributing to the enhancement of the artistic heritage, the dissemination of the French culture, language, and scientific knowledge, action in favor of the protection of the natural environment, or scientific action. That is the exception. In French, we call this last exception when a French donor can grant a gift to NPO based outside the EU, les règles de territorialité. So, as a conclusion, I hope I haven't been too long on these very technical issues. French tax regime is not simply to summary in 10 minutes. I will, of course, be happy to answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephane. There's actually a question in the chat from Pedro Cruz. Dear Stephane, I remember that articles 200 and 238 of CGI includes philanthropic activities, but this notion of philanthropy isn't correctly defined in CGI or its doctrine, with question mark.
Yes, the French tax code, CGI, article, yes, 238 bis 1. Yes, you have the fields of philanthropy. It's a very wide field, and the French doctrine is the question. I don't see the question on the chat, but the French tax authority do not give us a very specific scope definition of what we call philanthropic field for the application of the tax reductions. So we can imagine that a charity who aim to help people or other NPOs could be qualified as a philanthropic charities regarding the French tax code, but the specification of the French tax doctrine are not clear on this point, specific point. The reason why I didn't mention it in my short topo.
Thank you, Stephane. We have a Brexit question from Alexa Broad. Will a French donor ever be able to make a donation to a UK-based educational charity and benefit from any tax reduction?
Since Brexit, no. Yes, I regret, but since Brexit, UK is looked as a abroad country, non-EU country. So the only way to maintain the tax reduction for a French donor is either use the TGE procedure that I think it's applicable for UK now, or imagine that an educational field is enter into the field of humanitarian scope, which allow French donor to sustain a charity outside the EU. So that is the two options we study with some of our clients in this case.
Thank you very much, Stephane. Okay, now we're moving north of Europe to beautiful Netherlands, and we will talk with Marcel Mock, lawyer and executive director at the Chapel in New York, Netherlands Foundation. So Marcel will tell us about the Netherlands and his view about this topic of legal tax and legal benefits for fundraising in Europe, and maybe some development that could happen with Chapel in New York in other countries like France and Spain. So Marcel, I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. I'm very pleased that I can give some contribution to this webinar. It's always a bit difficult because you don't see any people. I see you, but I don't see others. But I'm told there's a very good audience. So I'm happy to give some brief introduction. Starting with the Netherlands. In corporate law, Netherlands has developed as a kind of gateway to Europe. And this may well be the case also if we talk about philanthropy or foundations and tax deductibility. Netherlands has lots of tax treaties, but these treaties have no meaning for philanthropy, but for corporate law. So Netherlands is a small country with some 70 million people. It has a real international flavor, an international trading history. And today, lots of trading and services is the key part of the economy. Also, there is a very strong industrial base by some leading companies as well. The focal point for philanthropy in the Netherlands is one needs to create a foundation which needs to work as a public benefit organization. In Dutch, abbreviated with the words AMBI, which in fact is the real central theme. This public benefit organization, as I will call it now, needs to be approved by the tax authority. The Dutch tax authority has centralized all philanthropy matters to one of its departments in the southern part of the Netherlands. And they take an active role in monitoring also what the public organizations are doing actually. Close monitoring we have seen over recent years. There was also question in Parliament how things develop. Several reports were made, several complaints were made about how things were developing. So over time, things have become more strict. When one wished to set up a foundation, it certainly needs to be not for profit. It needs to cover public interest for over 90%. And there needs to be transparency, which is a key thing. And that's really part of the monitoring. The transparency means that a policy plan, for example, need to be published, one need to be able to get access to that through the internet. So that means that every foundation which wants to be eligible for tax deduction needs to open a website. There are a number of rules. I don't go in all the details, but board members are not allowed to receive any payment. And integrity is an important part also. Over time, as I said, regulations become more strict. For example, cash donations are no longer possible. And there's also a restriction on the height of donations, which is now up to an amount of 250,000 euro. Unless what I just heard about France, there is not a real geographical limitation in the application of donations. In other words, if a US museum wants to set up a Friends of the Museum Foundation in the Netherlands, it will be possible to get tax deduction. But of course, the museum or the foundation, there need to be a tax deductible situation in the Netherlands. So without being tax deductible, there is no case. And of course, tax deductibility has to do with income tax and corporate income tax. I can add to that for cultural public benefits organization, there is even a higher grade of deductibility, that being the amount plus a a factor of 1.25% of that. Well, I think that's in brief what I can give you about the Netherlands system. Of course, we can go in much greater detail. Finally, I wish to mention that we have set up a number of years ago the Chapel and York Foundation Netherlands, which now is changing to a bigger geographical area, which means that also the nations in future can be covered, which are meant for organizations in France and organizations in Spain. And by that, some important steps have been set. If that will be complete, not complete yet, but expected to be completed later this year. And that may open also a way of even going to a larger geographical area. But let's first deal with the two big countries and see if we can get that going. That's what I can tell you. I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcel. So if you want to ask questions in the chat, actually there's one for Stephane about legacies. Are legacies made in France for an entire estate covered by the same rules for tax efficient giving to a UK-based educational charity as lifetime giving?
Okay. In fact, wait, it's a tricky question. It's a trick question. Regarding exemption of legacies in France, the person who has to pay tax regarding legacies is not the donor, but the beneficiary of the legacies. That's the first point. But if I grant, it's a very complicated thing, but if I grant a charity in the UK by a donation or a legacy, maybe we have the principle of taxation. We have to, there is a two codes, the French tax code and the UK one, but then you know that we have a convention between the two countries that settles the question of the risk of double imposition between the two countries regarding this case in particular. So I can't answer more precisely to this complicated question. Maybe it's not Pedro, it's Julie. We can try to have by email. I will check this and try to find a more precise answer to your question. But I afraid that the principle regarding the fact that tax reduction are more complicated since UK is not as left EU may have the same thing consequences regarding legacies between the two countries.
Thank you, Stephane. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Nancy, you want to say a few words before I conclude?
Yes, I want to talk about the UK.
Sure.
Even though we are not part of the EU anymore, we're still, I think, an important player in this region. Rather than talking about how you set up a UK charity, although it's relatively, it's as straightforward as anything is in today's sort of bizarre world of bank issues and anti-money laundering, etc. The thing I wanted to mention about the UK is the benefit for making a donation. We have something called gift aid here. And gift aid means when a donor, a UK taxpayer, makes a donation to a UK charity. So if you're outside the UK, obviously you have to have a partner in the UK to accept donations. The benefit is to the charity, unless you're what we call a higher rate taxpayer, in which case the charity gets a benefit, plus you get a small tax deduction as well. But basically, if a donor makes a donation of £100 to a charity and is eligible for gift aid, the charity can reclaim or ask the government for an extra 25%. So they're going to be able to get from the government a £25 additional amount for this donation, which is actually a huge benefit because it means without doing anything more for the money, but for having a relationship with a UK charity that can then make a grant to you, you're getting an extra 25% on the donation. I just feel that's such a significant thing, and I think a lot of people don't know about that. Now, obviously, if you don't have any potential donors in the UK, it's not very interesting. But if you do, it's worth knowing about and worth ensuring that you have made some relationship with a UK charity. You know, whether it's Chapel in York, UK Foundation, or something else, that's great. But because it really is a benefit that's not that's worth having. The UK is very knowledgeable and very interested in international donations and international effective charity. In fact, the original UK feeling for charity was international, and we go back to the Statute of Elizabeth in 1601. But anyway, I think that was so I don't want to really get into how you set up a charity in the UK. But I think because to me the really important thing for you all to understand is just this wonderful benefit that there is. I would also say that although the US is out of the of what we're talking about today, our UK and US charities are related so that we can offer Americans in the UK a benefit. They get gift aid in the UK, plus they get a US tax deduction. So they get two benefits for the same donation, which is extremely interesting. So those of you on the call who are in the UK may find that if you're talking to any donors, US donors here in the UK, it's worth at least remembering that this potential exists, because it's a huge benefit to them, and also reducing their tax in the UK can usually increase their tax in the US, because unlike most countries in the world, except the Philippines, Americans are taxed on their nationality rather than their residence. So it's another really important thing to understand. So I think there's some really good stuff about the UK if this is a country that is of interest to you. And I just wanted to say as well that our Swiss Foundation can do the same thing in Switzerland. We can accept donations from Swiss donors and make grants outside of Switzerland. There is a tax deduction available. Each canton has different rules, and rather than going into the various rules of cantons, I think it's worth just mentioning that to you. Also, that of course your donors will understand what their own tax position is most of the time, so that you don't have to understand each of their situations, just to be aware of the fact that you can be asking them if there's ways in which you can help them with tax deductions. I also wanted to just mention that I think there's a really good online resource. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, obviously, but PwC, and I'm not getting any money from them to say so, but they actually have a pretty good online tax summaries that you might find if you're trying to look at things. It's taxsummaries.pwc.com, and they're done by country, and they're done by the type of tax issues you're looking for. And I think they're pretty, and they're updated, regularly. So it might be a resource that you might want to look at if there's something that that you're particularly interested in another country, at least so that you have at least some idea of what's going on, rather than approaching donors in one of the European countries. And they do the whole world, which is brilliant, I think. But approaching somebody and wanting to at least have some idea of what you're telling them in the particular country. So I think that's a great resource. Obviously, here in Chapel in York, so alongside Arno, who runs our fundraising department, we actually set up and run charities. So, if you want to set up something in another country, we can do it, and we manage it. Or obviously our foundations, like the one that Marcel runs, or that Stephane is, I think, helping us with our French registration. This is a way of being able to fundraise in countries without having to set up your own legal entity, because after 25 years of setting up legal entities, it's becoming a real nightmare to do so, and generally unnecessary. King Baudouin Foundation also has a pretty good network, and there's others out there in the world. But we would be happy to answer any questions from anyone. If you want to to contact any of us at Chapel in York, we'll be able to answer specific questions or direct you to the right people if we can't help. Yeah, so that's us, and thank you very much for being here. Arno, are we taking any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Actually, we have a question from Aaron about who do I have to contact for more details for Spain?
Well, that will be Marcel, who's going to be involved in this. We're in the process of doing it at the moment, this registration. But if you keep in close contact with him, he'll be able to tell you when we're ready to roll on that country.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much for participating. We like these webinars to be effective. It doesn't have to be 1 hour long. It just have to be effective and give you good information. And I hope you had good information about this topic. We are very active around international fundraising. It's our passion. We're actually participating in case conferences. Nancy is going to the Middle East one in Abu Dhabi next week. We are a sponsor of the French Fundraiser Association Conference on 12th and 13th March. Nancy is coming, myself, and one of our experts from the UK and the US. I'm personally going to the case conference at the end of April for Latin America in Mexico. So we're very active, we're very passionate, and we're happy to help you. We organize webinars like this one every month. The next one is on March 27th, and it's also about tax and legal benefits, but this time for fundraising in the United States.
And Canada.
And Canada. Thank you very much, Nancy. So that's it for today. Follow us on LinkedIn. Get in touch with us. Marcel, Spain, France, Stephane, Nancy, everywhere, myself. If you need help with fundraising internationally, we're here for you. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.